Okay, so now let's get into the moment of the day, the tariff war that has been launched. Okay, first it's important to understand, I think, what tariffs are, because a lot of times people think that it's like, okay, if you put 25% tariffs on Mexico, then Mexican government or Mexican companies have to pay that tariff to send. So what happens is that, like, a company like Walmart, right, who gets a lot of products from China for sure. So when they get products from China, now they'll have to pay that 10% to import board games made in China, right? Mm-hmm. So if they were spending $10 million on board games made from China, shipped to their warehouse, now they would have to pay 11 million. They would have to pay $11 million because you have to have $1 million surplus, which is 10%, and China got hit with the 10%. So they would pay 11 million instead of 10 million, right? So what happens is that how it affects everyday Americans is that they would increase the price. They're not going to take a loss on their profit margins, right? So if the board games was now $50, then they would increase it, whatever they needed to increase it to make sure they're still making a profit margin. So 50 might go to $55, right, to stay in line with that 10% that they have to pay. So now you pay $5 for every board game instead of more than the $50 that you would have paid. And that's true for lumber coming from Canada. That's true from avocados coming from Mexico. That's true from technology coming from China, all of the above.
Cars, all that.
And then there's retaliatory tariffs that these countries said that they would levy against American products. But the problem is that American is a consumer-based land where we import a lot of stuff, right? We don't really necessarily make a lot of stuff, even chips. Like, we import a lot of the technology, we import a lot of the consumer goods, we import, if you look at fashion, sneakers, all shoe wear, all that stuff is imported. So that is harmful as far as that. We would have to, like, redesign our economy to start making things here in America as opposed to shipping it. But it affects these other countries because what also happens is that they will probably start to order less of something. So that would hurt the local businesses in those particular countries. So it's been said that it actually could send Canada and Mexico into a recession for sure. So on news of that, the stock market dropped pretty drastically overnight, and it was a lot of information about how, you know, tariffs don't really work historically. The last time we had a real massive tariff plan, the country went into a great recession, the Great Depression. And then after that, when the country started booming, that was when you hear this term free trade. That's when America started the free trade, right? Where they realized that it doesn't work to tax other countries. We have to do free trade and bring the products in. And that's actually what made the economy the biggest economy in the world. But they're saying that it's going too far now and that they have to. And then this fentanyl thing is interesting because usually if tariffs is because of economic situations or people feel like that, you know, usually it's not because of illegal drugs. But Trump has made a major push on immigration, illegal immigration, and fentanyl. So, long story short, he announced 25% tariffs on Mexico, 25% tariffs on Canada, and 10% tariffs on China.
In addition to the 10% that he put the last time.
To start tomorrow, Tuesday. And market reacted negatively, but it kind of rebounded a little bit, especially when news broke that for Mexico, it would be a 30-day extension on this because the president of Mexico agreed to send 10,000 troops to the border immediately to try to carve the smuggling of fentanyl, amongst other things. So now it becomes a situation where, because he said, like, this will cause some short-term pain, but it's going to be long-term. It's going to be good for the country. So is this a situation of bad governance as far as starting wars with our allies, or is it a situation of great deal making and chicken, right? The winner of the game of chicken is the person who has the strongest nerves and the biggest gun, right? Like, if you pull out a pistol and I got a bazooka, 9 times out of 10, the bazooka's going to win. So you play bully ball with Mexico and Canada. China's might be a little tougher, but it's still some level of negotiation. It leaves some level of negotiation if you can actually think, if they think that you're serious about something, then then we have to sit at a table and try to figure this thing out.
Is it an issue of bad governance? I'll go to Milton Friedman's quote. If we're in a boat together and I shoot into the bottom of the boat with tariffs, would it be smart for the other countries to retaliate and then shoot in the boat again to add in terms of retaliation? We all end up losing and drowning together. I've never sat in the president's seat, of course, so I don't know how stressful that job could be. But if you look historically, like you said, it's never worked out. I think sometimes there's a part of business that is dog eat dog, very malicious, very grimy. The higher you ascend, though, you have to find a way to say, hey, this isn't good for either country. And I think Presidente Sheinbaum extended an offer to say, hey, I'm going to send some people to the border because we don't want to go out to all-out war. The Mexican peso, the value dropped. The value of the Canadian dollar dropped as well. But at the highest level, how real business is done is saying, hey, this is going to end badly for both of us. What can we do to mitigate this? And what concessions can I make that you need on my end? And what concessions can you make so no one suffers? When we get into this jousting between countries and nations and leaderships, it hurts our country really bad. And a lot of short-term decision-making hurts us long-term. Going back to the post you guys made a couple of weeks ago, like Chicago selling out that parking garage for a short-term need for the city. And now another country is making billions off of that. So I pray that they find a way to come to a resolution so that we can get along, because China is the real enemy or bully that we have to worry about.
Yeah, and I think the direct people who are going to be affected is the American people.
For sure, the consumer.
You're talking about prices going up. You're talking about groceries. You're talking about, they said the average car, obviously, because we import a lot of car. Average car price is going to go up by $3,000 to $5,000. Electronics for sure are going to go up in price. People are looking at Best Buy stock as a company that, like, they may take the toughest hit because a lot of their stuff comes from overseas.
Demolished.
The toy market, so you're talking about Target and all these consumer discretionary stores, 85% of the toys that come in America are made in China. So, like you said, these companies are going to say, hey, we'll just pay this. They're just going to raise the prices, and obviously the American population is going to have to take those prices. So the first thing is like, yeah, we'll make more stuff here. Well, it's going to cost you more to make more stuff here. And then if they think people are making domestic products and they have no international barriers, they're going to say, all right, well, if we have no competition, then we can just price gauge. We'll make it to a price where we think that it should be. There is no competition come from anywhere else, which hurts. On the opposite end is like, if you're looking at it from the Fed standpoint, if we see people watch prices go up and they stop spending, well, those are indications that, hey, if people are slowing down on spending, can we bring down inflation? Right? So like there's a big game to play, but it ultimately comes down to a leverage situation, right? Who can withstand this longer? When you look at the GDP for Mexico, 35% of its GDP comes from exports from the US.
Mm-hmm.
How long can you withstand going to war with them? You can't. Like, that's nearly half of your gross domestic. It's coming from the U.S. Canada, 22% of their GDP comes from U.S. exports. So you're talking about a quarter of whatever the country brings in, a quarter of it is coming from the U.S. in terms of exports.
Yep.
On the inverse, 1% of the GDP for the United States comes from Mexico, and 1.5% from Canada. So if we're going to play this like the long game, I know the president's saying, hey, it's going to be some short-term pain, but eventually we'll get to this point where, hey, we're now back in the position where we need to be, where we're not getting quote unquote bullied. It's dangerous, right? Because how long countries can do this, but the individual person, like, you're putting a lot of things in jeopardy for the everyday person.